She cheated with my brother, then tried to come back. Big mistake. When I first found out about the betrayal, it didn't feel real. My girlfriend Jenna, the person I had trusted with everything, had been sneaking around with my brother. We had been together for 3 years, and I had thought we were planning a future together. I met her at a mutual friend's party. She was magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly command attention without even trying. We hit it off that night, bonding over shared interests and an easy sense of humor. She made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced before, especially coming from a family that had always overshadowed me with my brother's achievements. For years, she was my rock, someone who made me believe I could step out from that shadow. My brother, on the other hand, had always been the golden child. From the time we were kids, he was the one who won every award, aced every exam, and charmed every adult he met. I remember one Christmas when I proudly showed off a model airplane I built, only for my parents to gush over the expensive drone he brought home from college. It was always like that. His accomplishments weren't just celebrated. They were weaponized to remind me of my supposed shortcomings. When he got his first big promotion, my parents threw him a lavish dinner and spent the entire evening talking about his bright future. When I got my first job, they barely acknowledged it. The dynamic didn't change as we got older. Even in small ways, he always found a way to outshine me. At family gatherings, he had an effortless way of charming everyone in the room, while I felt like I was struggling to keep up. It wasn't just his achievements that set him apart. It was the way my parents put him on a pedestal. They would excuse his mistakes, praise his every move, and compare me to him in ways that left no doubt about who they thought was better. She had always been charming and confident, someone who fit in seamlessly at family gatherings, which is probably how the connection with my brother started. Looking back, I can see the moments I missed, the shared glances, the way she seemed to laugh a little too hard at his jokes. I thought she was just being friendly, trying to navigate the complicated dynamics of my family. I never imagined there was something deeper happening behind my back. It was at a family event, one of those gatherings meant to celebrate my brother's birthday. I walked into the living room and froze. There they were, my brother, Ryan, and Jenna, my ex, caught in an intimate moment that shattered every ounce of trust I had left. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even hear me walk in. I couldn't breathe, couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. My body went numb, and for a few moments, I just stood there, watching the betrayal unfold. The rage came next. It surged through me, burning hotter than I could control. I didn't even think, I just reacted, shouting their names, demanding answers. I watched as their faces drained of color, both of them fumbling for words that didn't matter. I screamed, accusing them of everything, the lies, the deceit, the years I had wasted believing in something that was nothing more than a facade. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart with every word I said. Then, my parents rushed in, their expressions tight with discomfort. Before I could even finish what I was saying, they sided with Ryan. They always did. They muttered about how Ryan didn't mean to hurt me, how it wasn't as bad as I was making it out to be. The way they turned their backs on me, the way they whispered to Ryan in hushed tones, made it clear. I was the problem, not him. I felt my chest tighten with a mixture of disbelief and fury. It was as if I was invisible at that moment. My years of loyalty, my pain, none of it mattered. They didn't even try to see it from my side. Jenna, once my confidant, just stood there, avoiding my gaze, her guilt palpable. But my parents? They excused their actions as if it was somehow my fault, like I had somehow pushed them into each other. It was the final blow, the realization that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for them. I couldn't stay there any longer. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the room, my heart pounding, my chest tight with the weight of it all. I didn't care if they tried to stop me. I couldn't be in that house, surrounded by people who didn't care, not anymore. I grabbed my jacket, didn't even look back as I left the house, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. It was over. Everything was over. Leaving the house that night felt like escaping a burning building, but the flames followed me. My mind raced with every memory of Jenna and me, every laugh, every promise, every plan we'd made together. It all felt like a sick joke now. I wanted to forget her, forget Ryan, forget the family that had just proved once again how little I mattered to them. But I couldn't escape the betrayal. It clung to me like a second skin, suffocating and inescapable. The breakup wasn't a clean cut. Jenna came to me a week later, feigning remorse, telling me she hadn't meant for things to happen this way. But her words rang hollow, her excuses infuriating. She claimed it wasn't about hurting me. It was about her feelings, about Ryan, about some spark she couldn't deny. I could barely look at her without wanting to scream. She didn't even try to hide her selfishness. She wasn't sorry she'd hurt me. She was sorry I wasn't understanding enough to make it easier for her. The worst part was how my family rallied behind them. Within weeks, Ryan and Jenna were openly dating, and my parents acted like it was some great love story. These things happen, they said, as though their betrayal was an act of fate, not a calculated decision to break me. They insisted I had to let it go, that I should be happy for them. Happy. The word made me sick. They had stolen everything from me, my trust, my relationship, and now my family's loyalty, and still had the audacity to expect my blessing. Every family dinner became unbearable. They would sit together, holding hands like they hadn't destroyed me, while my parents gushed about how meant to be they were. I could barely eat, barely speak. Every time I tried to express my anger, my family shut me down. "You can't help who you fall in love with," they said, as if that excused everything. I wasn't just the collateral damage of their so-called love. I was the obstacle they wanted out of the way. The loneliness was crushing. I couldn't go to family events without feeling like an outsider in my own bloodline. I had to watch my parents dote on them, fawning over their happiness, while my pain was dismissed as petty bitterness. They even urged me to make amends, telling me I was being immature for holding on to anger. But how could I forgive them when they'd taken everything from me? How could I move on when every family gathering was a reminder of what I'd lost? It wasn't just Jenna or Ryan anymore, it was all of them. They had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. I was done trying to prove my worth to people who refused to see it. One night, after yet another dinner filled with backhanded comments and forced smiles, I stood up and walked out without a word. I didn't know if I was walking away for good, but at that moment, I didn't care. I was done letting them tear me apart piece by piece. After cutting ties with my family, I thought I could start rebuilding myself, but the bitterness lingered. Ryan and Jenna's relationship became a grotesque spectacle I couldn't escape, even from a distance. My parents would send passive-aggressive messages, urging me to be the bigger person and accept their love. Friends who still attended family events told me about how Jenna had seamlessly taken my place, charming my family even more than before. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It had infected every part of my life, every memory I thought was mine alone. But the cracks in their perfect facade started to show. Jenna had always been ambitious, almost recklessly so. She loved the high life, expensive dinners, lavish vacations, and designer clothes. When we were together, I'd indulged her when I could, but it was clear that Ryan had taken things a step further. He was paying for her every whim, playing the role of the devoted partner, the one who would give her the world. It didn't take long for those expenses to start catching up to him. I heard whispers about Ryan's financial troubles through mutual acquaintances. He'd maxed out credit cards, dipped into savings, and even taken out loans to keep Jenna happy. It wasn't surprising. Jenna had always been charming, but beneath that charm was a hunger for more money, more luxury, more admiration. Ryan had taken my place, but he'd also inherited the impossible task of keeping up with her demands. I couldn't lie, it felt good to hear about his struggles. For once, Golden Boy Ryan wasn't untouchable. I started paying closer attention, quietly gathering information. Ryan had always been proud of his success, flaunting his promotions and investments. But now, I noticed the subtle changes. He wasn't showing off anymore, wasn't boasting about his latest wins. Instead, he seemed tense, quieter than usual. Jenna, on the other hand, was as radiant as ever, posting pictures of herself in designer outfits, tagging locations I knew Ryan couldn't afford. It was clear she wasn't slowing down, even as his resources dried up. The breaking point came during one of their lavish vacations. A friend of mine who still followed Jenna on social media sent me a screenshot. Jenna had posted a story of herself lounging by a private pool, captioned, "Living my best life." In the background, Ryan was on his laptop, his face strained. The image told me everything I needed to know. Jenna was still taking, and Ryan was struggling to keep up, drowning in the life she demanded. It was poetic, really. The brother who had always been untouchable, the one who'd taken everything from me, was now trapped in a sinking ship of his own making. But I didn't want to just sit back and watch. This wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the kind of pain I'd felt, the kind that leaves you gutted and raw. So I started planning, carefully, methodically. If Jenna's greed was their weak spot, then that's where I'd strike. The first message from Jenna came late at night. Just a simple, "Hey." I almost deleted it without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. She was reaching out, testing the waters, trying to gauge if I still harbored enough bitterness or longing to give her an opening. Over the next few weeks, the messages became more frequent. She complained about Ryan's financial struggles, how he couldn't keep up with her lifestyle, how he wasn't the man she thought he was. The audacity was almost laughable. At first, I ignored her. I didn't want to engage, didn't want to let her pull me into whatever game she was playing. But then it hit me. This was my chance. Jenna was desperate, her mask slipping, and if I played my cards right, I could finally get the truth. Not just about her, but about everything. The affair, the lies, her motives. I decided to respond, keeping my messages short and measured, just enough to string her along. I let her think I was still hurt, still vulnerable, still angry enough to want her back. She confessed things I already knew and things I hadn't even imagined. She admitted to the affair, calling it a mistake, but quickly pivoted to blaming Ryan for her unhappiness. She said he was useless, that he didn't have the drive or ambition she thought he did. She painted herself as a victim, trapped in a relationship that wasn't fulfilling her. All the while, she kept hinting at how much she missed what we had, how I had always understood her in ways Ryan never could. I played along, biting back my disgust, keeping my end goal in mind. Ryan's birthday was the perfect stage for my plan. My family, as expected, was throwing him an extravagant party, complete with speeches and toasts to celebrate their golden child. The same house where I'd walked in on their betrayal now served as the backdrop for my revenge. I showed up dressed sharply, my confidence masking the turmoil beneath. The moment I walked in, I could see their unease. Ryan avoided my gaze. Jenna seemed flustered, and my parents were suspiciously cheerful, likely hoping this was the first step toward my healing. When it was my turn to give a toast, I stood up, glass in hand, and smiled. I started off light, joking about sibling rivalries and how Ryan had always been the star of the family. My parents beamed, thinking I was finally falling back into line. I even raised my glass to Jenna, calling her a perfect match for Ryan. The room relaxed, their smug satisfaction palpable. But then I shifted my tone, my voice sharper, the room tightening with the weight of my words. I told them I'd been hesitant to come, considering the history we all shared, but that I had something important to share, something I felt Ryan deserved to know. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots, and started reading Jenna's texts aloud. The ones where she begged to come back to me. The ones where she called Ryan a failure. The ones where she admitted she'd been using him from the start. The room fell silent, the only sound Jenna's sharp intake of breath and Ryan's face turning an impossible shade of red. I turned to Jenna, my voice steady but dripping with disdain, and said, "So tell me, Jenna, was this the true love my family insisted I accept, or just another one of your stepping stones?" I turned to Ryan next, locking eyes with him. "You wanted everything I had, didn't you? Well, congratulations, brother. Now you have it, in all its ugly, hollow glory." My parents tried to interject, but I silenced them with a glare, finally unleashing years of frustration. "You chose this. You chose them, and you'll have to live with the mess you defended." I set my glass down, the toast unfinished, and walked out for the last time. I didn't need their approval, their love, or their pity anymore. I was done being a pawn in their twisted games. I walked into the cold night air, free at last, leaving their chaos behind me for good. That night, I sat in my apartment with a quiet satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. The tension I'd carried for so long had finally released. For the first time, I'd stood up for myself, not just to Jenna and Ryan, but to my entire family. I poured myself a drink, letting the silence of my space settle around me, free from the noise of their betrayal. But the peace didn't last long. Around midnight, I heard a loud banging on my door. When I opened it, there she was, Jenna. She was swaying on unsteady feet, her makeup smudged, her eyes glassy from too much alcohol. She reeked of wine and bad decisions, clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. Before I could say anything, she stumbled inside, slurring my name, her voice dripping with venom. She started ranting immediately, her words tumbling over each other in a drunken, incoherent mess. She blamed me for everything, her humiliation, Ryan's anger, the cracks forming in the perfect little life she had built for herself. "You ruined me," she slurred, her voice rising as she stumbled around my apartment, gesturing wildly. She accused me of being petty, of not being able to move on, of dragging her through the mud in front of everyone. She painted herself as the victim yet again, completely blind to the destruction she had left in her wake. Her words were as sharp as they were desperate, but they couldn't cut me anymore. I stayed calm, refusing to give her the reaction she wanted. Her rant escalated, her voice growing louder, more erratic, as she knocked over a glass on my coffee table. When she started moving closer, pointing her finger at me like I was the villain in her tragic story, I knew I'd had enough. I stepped back, picked up my phone, and called the police. She didn't even notice at first, too lost in her drunken tirade to see what was happening. When I hung up and told her the police were on their way, her demeanor shifted, fear flashing across her face for the briefest moment. She tried to argue, to plead with me, but I stood firm. "You need to leave," I said, my voice cold and final. When the police arrived, they found her sitting on my couch, head in her hands, still muttering incoherently. I explained the situation, and they escorted her out. She turned back once, her eyes glassy and filled with something I couldn't decipher, regret, anger, maybe both. But I didn't care anymore. That was the last time I ever saw her. After they left, I stood in the silence of my apartment, feeling a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. She was gone, truly gone, and with her, the last threads of a life I no longer wanted to be a part of. That night, I made a promise to myself. No more looking back. No more letting people like Jenna or Ryan or even my family dictate my worth. I locked the door behind me and walked into the next chapter of my life, leaving their chaos behind forever.